Greetings, YouTube. I like to keep watch on the red caps. Now, sometimes I do that by just perusing the news. It's not hard to find them. They're usually breaking the law in some way. But other times I like to get info from within their own community because that's very informative. Sometimes because of what they say, sometimes because of how they say it, and sometimes about what they're not saying. So you have to interpret some of the things they say. And one of the best places I've ever found to do that is a place called shtfplan.com, which stands for Shit Hit the Fan Plan. The idea being that when things go completely tits up, like society completely collapses, you need a plan rather than, invest the effort to make sure that society doesn't do that. They would rather invest the effort to make sure that they have a way of escaping from the damage that happened while they ignored the problems of the world and focused on themselves alone. Maybe their family, potentially their friends, though I'm sure they would fall upon each other like ravenous zombies in no time at all. So I'm going to cover some of the things I've got on the front page of their particular channel. Now this is front page. And it goes in reverse chronological order. So the article at the top of the page is the most common, the most recent article, and then it goes down from there. And these headlines are telling. Texas ended lockdown and mask mandates. Now lockdown states where COVID is growing most. That isn't the truth. That isn't. Places that let slip with their lockdown plans are seeing more of an outburst than places that didn't. It's pretty simple, and the correlation and causation are the same. Places that have slack guidelines for the pandemic have more cases than those that have rigid guidelines for the pandemic. Okay, the reasons why leftists will never successfully disarm Americans. And this is interesting. They actually categorize leftists, for people who have a left-leaning political agenda, as not Americans. Now, what gets me about this is if you were to ask them to list the rights that they have as American, almost every single thing they're going to list is going to be a progressive policy that was put into place by people that would have been considered progressives in the time it was established. So they're going to give you a list of all the things that they enjoy as an American. And then on now, if you tell them all the things that, like, say, Europeans enjoy beyond those, they're going to tell you that that's not possible. That can't happen in America, even though it works quite nicely in other countries. The cognitive dissonance to ignore the progressive history of our country and to ignore the progressive folks that are working to make our country and the world better now, and to categorize them as not Americans is just astounding. More MSM fear-mongering. New Texas COVID variant is antibody resistant. Well, that's why we're getting people vaccinated, because humans have never been exposed to this virus before, which is why we are having problems resisting it. And the longer the virus is allowed to exist within human populations, the more variants will occur. If we had locked the country down last March or April of 2020, we had just shut it down and paid Americans to stay home for like 3 months. Every American. You stay home for 3 months. The only things that are open are like hardware stores and grocery stores. That's it. We would have stopped this dead in its track. But there are too many people like this that won't wear masks, that won't follow orders, that don't give a shit about their fellow human beings. But they do give a shit about making up crap that isn't true or interpreting real world data through a very skewed lens. Here's an ad for gold. They love gold. Oh yeah, lots of gold ads. I can see 3. Oh, no, sorry. This one over here is for uranium goes mainstream. Okay, that makes me feel comfortable. As American focuses on internal strife, a war between Israel and Iran could literally start Iran at any moment. They love Israel. Not because they actually like Jewish people. They don't. They're almost exclusively anti-Semites. So they love Israel because it's a state that they can back, because the Israel government is fascist and very much anti-Muslim. In addition, some of them believe the end of the world is going to happen and they need to back Israel because they've convinced themselves that Israel needs to exist to help move that clock forward. Yeah, they're not well-hinged humans. The rising threat of nuclear war is the most urgent matter in the world. No, no, no. The pandemic we're currently experiencing, that's the most urgent matter in the world. If we don't get that under control, we will at least not have to worry about nuclear war. NBC deceptively edits 9/11 call and video from fatal police shooting involving knife-wielding teen girl. Now, I actually don't know the details of this case. I'm going to tell you that right up front. But you know what I do know? That cops regularly arrest white men who have just murdered people who are heavily armed. So whether this teen girl was or was not armed does not matter. They seem incapable of arresting black people. They're really good at murdering them, though. Scientist who helped develop Pfizer vaccine says a third shot will be needed. Yes, just like we have annual vaccines for the flu. I get mine every year. I've just booked an appointment recently so I can get the shingles vaccine. Why? Because I understand the germ theory of disease and the scientific method. And as we learn more about things, we alter our plans. We update them. That's how the scientific method works. You take in new data, you modify the existing model, and you move forward. And the new model says that we may have to have a third shot with Pfizer. Okay, I got the Moderna. I haven't heard about Moderna needing a third shot. I'm still waiting for my second one. Actually, by the time you guys see this, I don't know if I'll have it, and I have to check my calendar. Palm scanning payment is coming to Whole Foods. Biometrics isn't a big deal in my book. If you want to have your biometrics registered with a store for the purposes of using them at that store, you can. They're not going to require it. And you know what almost every one of these red caps carries around? A tracking device. Right here. This is a tracking device. If you say something around this device right now, if I were to repeat a single word over and over again, and I would probably start getting ads for that word because it's listening to me right now. I can turn it off if you want, but it also cuts down on its utility. I won't get phone calls. I won't get updates. I get weather and news and texts, and you know, there's one right here right now. It's a little YouTube symbol, which means I just got an update to YouTube on it. So I've decided that I understand that this is a tracking device, and I'm willing to accept the fact that that is so. But I don't convince myself it isn't. For example, I would not commit a crime while carrying it because I'm smart. So if palm scanning does come to Whole Foods, have at it. I'm not giving them my biometrics. Record-shattering cold in quotations hits central U.S. That's April 22nd. So we had a snowstorm not long ago here in New Hampshire. It's spring. And if you're saying that this is a sign that global climate change isn't happening, no, it's a sign that global climate change is happening. As we pump more and more energy in the system, it becomes more and more unstable. And you're going to get more and more varied and radical shifts in temperature and weather patterns. Things are going to get worse. They're not going to become more stable. Putin's key State of the Nation address, swift and tough response coming for those crossing red line. Well, interesting. He's already started to back down on certain things. I wonder why. Maybe because the guy in charge of our country isn't a fucking numpty. U.S. and Russian relations hit all-time low. Well, seeing as the Russians are an autocratic state that wants to control everything around them and crush dissent within their own country and will use fascist tactics to achieve it, I don't care if we have a bad relationship with the Russian government. They're horrible people. Putin is a fucking monster. Trillions of microplastic particles are in our air, our water, and our bodies, and they are literally destroying the earth. Yes. Thank you for that statement of reality. Another possible side effect of COVID vaccines, herpes. This is the first time I've heard this, and I'd be intrigued to see what their justification is. I'm not going to research it because it's probably absolutely utter bullshit. But seeing as this is the only site I have ever seen it mentioned, I'm going to put it into a category of probably something I don't need to worry about. More gold. Farmers warn that mega drought in the western U.S. threatens to cause devastating crop failures in 2021. Yes, proof of global climate change because we're screwing with the climate. Britain to deploy 2 warships to Black Sea as solidarity with Ukraine. Good on them. We should do the same. Russian forces mount on Ukraine border. Oh, they back down. The rulers want you locked up in your home forever. Do not travel. Well, if you are not vaccinated, not traveling is the smart thing to do. In fact, if you decided you don't want to get a vaccine, you should stay in your home forever. It's where you belong. You are Typhoid Mary. We don't need you in public. The media lied repeatedly about the officer Brian Sicknick's death, and they got caught. I actually don't. Is that the guy that got killed in the Capitol? The cop that got killed in the Capitol by beaten to death by the Red Caps? I'm not positive. I honestly can't remember. There are so many people killed in America on a regular basis. Keeping track of their names is somewhat difficult. But I'm going to guess that the media didn't lie in the particular way that they think they did. Yeah, I've noticed that their view of what the mainstream media does is just a smidge skewed. This is martial law, in quotes. U.S. soldiers forced woman from car at gunpoint for pumping gas past curfew. I don't think that probably happened, at least not in that way. But if there's a curfew for a reason, and you're going to say, oh, you're acquiescing. I'm acquiescing to certain orders because we are in a goddamn pandemic. And it's the people that won't stay home, the people that won't curtail their actions by avoiding contact, being socially distanced, wearing masks, that are causing the problems. Then we have no medical science, in quotes, behind Michigan mandate to mask 2-year-olds, doctor warns. So they say doctor, singular, and I'm sure you could find a doctor that would back up any position in the world you want. Now, if you show me the consensus among doctors, doctors, that would be something I might listen to. But you say doctor, singular, yeah, it's not hard to find a quack to back up anything you want to back up. In quotes, the vaccine won't be enough. The rulers demand full enslavement. No, they don't. They actually want you to get right back to living the capitalist life, which is a form of enslavement, I guess. Capitalism is death. But the vaccine is going to need to be around if we want to ever have lives that aren't involving socially distancing and masks and not being able to hug our friends. Yeah. YouTube gives itself free expression award, then brags about censoring dissent. YouTube doesn't censor enough. YouTube lets people like this all the time spread disinformation. They allow people to produce videos that are channels right into white nationalism. PragerU is allowed to put up content on this channel on the YouTube platform all the damn time. And remember, they're a private corporation. You know that whole gay cake thing? Well, YouTube's a private corporation. Anything that YouTube doesn't want on their platform doesn't stay on their platform. It's not real hard to figure that one out. 1/3 of Americans are now fully vaccinated, in quotes. In quote. Why is that in quotes? And now that I'm more thinking about the itch and I'm trying not to touch it, the worse it's getting. I don't know why I itch my nose. Globalists will need another crisis in America as their reset agenda fails. Now, globalists is the red cat code word for Jewish people. Remember, they like Israel, the government. They don't like Israelis or Jewish people. They are anti-Semites. And here's an example. Globalist is the dog whistle for Jewish people. An outlook for gold. Hey, there's an article about gold. I will not be looking at that. Hello Pal app. Get paid in crypto to stream. Is it too good to be true? Yes. And cryptocurrency is a Ponzi scheme. Twitter permanently bans James O'Keefe for proving CNN is propaganda. You know, I got to tell you, of all the news outlets in the world, CNN isn't agenda-free. they're owned by corporations who want to push a very conservative worldview. But they're much less propaganda-like than, say, Fox News. I don't know who this James O'Keefe dude is. If Twitter bans them, again, private corporation, they can ban anybody they want to for any reason. Okay. Rule by fiat. They love the word fiat. When the government does whatever it wants. You mean like a shitgibbon that just issued bans for Muslim people and bans on trans troops and and all the different horrible things he did through executive orders just because he could, that hurt America and hurt Americans and killed people? You mean like that? Okay. When ruling class and big pharma team up to push a third COVID shot. Well, the fusion of the ruling class and corporations is fascism. So they are concerned. They should be justly concerned about that. But push a third COVID shot. Remember, that's how science works. That's why we have annual shots for flus. We may have to have an annual COVID shot. That's just it. New diseases happen. We have to deal with that fact. I don't understand why the scientific method is so confusing to these people. Food prices are rising aggressively, and even the corporate media is admitting that it's only going to get worse. Yes, because we have a broken system because of capitalism, and we artificially have suppressed the cost of many things to give Americans the impression that food is far cheaper than it is, because we don't pay the people that produce the food real living wages, let alone thriving wages. Former FDA chief warns his U.S. will struggle, in quotes, to reach herd immunity as vaccine refusals rise. Yes, they got one right. Yes, if people don't get vaccinated, we will never achieve herd immunity, and the disease will continue to flourish and continue to mutate, and maybe perchance someday mutate to the point where our current vaccines can't stop it at all. Whereas if we had all vaccinated as fast as possible, which we should do, and we'd all tried to socially distance and lock down ourselves like we should have, we wouldn't be in this place. And we would have be far closer to herd immunity than we are at the minute. But, they got one right. Biden administration ramps up tensions with Russia, institutes sanctions. Russian is an autocratic fascist state. Fuck them. Facebook executive told whistleblower state-sponsored disinformation, that's in quotations, is job security. I don't believe that. Here's a good one. CNN admits to fear-mongering the COVID-19 scamdemic. That's a hard word to say. It's the double M's, I think. Yeah, they don't believe that the pandemic is real because they're idiots. The red caps are fear-mongering idiots. They don't understand science, and they're the reason that the pandemic is continuing. They're the reason we have more than 500,000 deaths in America, and they're the reason that the mutations are happening because they won't pay attention to the medical experts and do what they tell them to do. Ukraine demands more weapons, more money, more support to join NATO from Biden. Good. Ukraine should be part of NATO, and we should be telling the Russians, get your ass out of Ukraine right now, forever, because Russia is dangerous, and we need to contain them. The helicopter parent fed and the fatal crash of risk. All the risk generated by gambling with trillions of borrowed and leveraged dollars don't actually vanish. They just transfer by the Fed to the entire system. Yeah, that's a good one. Ruling class unites to push the vaccines. Well, you know how you can tell the ruling something is safe? Because the people in charge of the country are lining up as fast as possible to get it. They're bribing, they're begging, they're borrowing, they're stealing whatever they can to get their hands on the vaccines. That's how you know they're safe and how we should have them. So the ruling class unites to push the vaccine because maybe the ruling class is a hell of a lot more intelligent than the people that run this site. There's more James O'Keefe crap. Russia warns us to stay away from the Black Sea for its own good. We should not. We are now entering full-blown tyranny in the Western world. The idea that white people have to obey orders is what's triggering these folks. The Western world has been enacting tyranny across the planet for hundreds and hundreds of years, for just centuries. We have been crushing and destroying other nations for centuries. And they didn't have a problem with that because none of those acts impacted white people. Now, white people are being impacted because of the world pandemic, and they're now upset and they're screaming tyranny. Based if anybody could spell it. A 75-year-old warning about those who say, listen to the science. That's when listen to the science is in quotes, which means they don't listen to science, and they are probably misinterpreting whatever this warning was. And I'm going to use quotes on that one because I don't believe it. Iran vows to respond to Israelis' alleged sabotage at Natanz nuclear site. No. Israel screwed with Iran. Fauci dubbed a petty tyrant for saying vaccine people can't eat or drink indoors, or vaccinated people. That's not what he's been saying. They are lying. They did put in eat or drink indoors as quotes, so they know they're lying as well. Beast system rages on. Pentagon creates microchip that detects COVID-19. Wow. There's too much for me to unpack in that one. More Russian crap. The Corbett report removed from YouTube. I'm assuming that's probably some red cap propaganda. New study of COVID variant affected the vaccinated more than the unvaccinated. I have seen no information about such a report except for this site, so I'm not going to believe it. A German ruling class tries to figure out how to impose new and harsh lockdowns. Well, the government's trying to do that because they're having a surge. So yes, they're putting lockdowns because lockdowns work. Minnesota descends into violence after police shoot unarmed man. Well, yes. Well, it's not necessarily violence. It did descend into protest. Sometimes there is violence between protests. A lot of the time there isn't. In fact, like 90% of the time protests are nonviolent. The media doesn't tell you about that because if it leads, it bleeds. And red caps won't talk about that at all. But one of the things that they call violence is property damage. Now in America, if you do property damage and you're black, execution is your punishment. But in America, but not in America, if the cops execute somebody, they don't think the property damage is the right response. Financial tyranny, footing the tax bill for the government fiscal insanity. Giving the rich people trillions of dollars of tax breaks so they don't pay any income tax, that's fiscal insanity. Yes, that's fiscal insanity. So we're footing the bill for that forever. All right, we're almost done. Rana Veeg, Biden's tax plan, and the central bank is setting up a perfect storm for precious metals. Oh, more fear about, this is fear about gold, not just gold. Political masters call on other members of the ruling class to make vaccines mandatory. Yes, they should be. If you're not vaccinated, you are Typhoid Mary. You should stay in your home and never leave. Infrastructure bills do not lead to recovery, only increase federal control. No. Infrastructure bills have infrastructure improvements we know work. We did it in the aftermath of the Great Depression. They very much work. And they're the reason that we have a functioning nation, and it was one of the driving forces for the greatest surge of American growth in the middle class and organized labor in America's history. It is after that faded that we began to see the slow decline of the American middle class and the increase in billionaires. Back in the 50s, 35% of our federal funds were funded through corporate taxes. Now it's 7%. I'd be happy with 35 again. That seems fair. A third of it for corporate America? That seems to make sense. But yeah, infrastructure we desperately need. We desperately need. Our bridges are falling apart. Our roads are falling apart. Our dikes are falling apart. Our canals and such are falling apart. Yeah, we need infrastructure. War is looming. U.S. delivers military cargo to Ukraine. More Ukraine stuff. What could go awry? I'm not going to read that big blog. WEF warns of cyber attack leading to systemic collapse of the global financial system. We're always at war, we're concerned with cyber attacks. They're dangerous. Colorado vax site closes early due to adverse reactions. No, that's not what they're talking about. Fauci, COVID-19 cases have plateaued by disturbingly high levels. On the April 9th, they were doing horrible things on the 8th, and they still are in many places in America. Former Pfizer VP warns your government is lying to you. Again, and your government is lying to you is in quotes. I don't believe it. Exclamation point though, so maybe they really want you to believe that lie. And lastly, on their front page, fully vaccinated, in quotes, Michigan resident catch COVID-19, 3 die. Yeah, vaccination doesn't mean you're not going to catch a disease. It just isn't. You still can catch a disease even if you're fully vaccinated. But if you've got the disease, you have a much less chance of dying, much less chance of suffering a serious consequence. That's how vaccines work. They have taught your body how to defend itself from a virus. It is not a guarantee you will never get the virus. It just means that if you do, you will already have the instruction manual right in front of you. And so you'll be able to do better. Now, it also isn't a guarantee that people aren't going to die. I'm sorry that there are no guarantees in life like that. Anyone out there who thinks there is, I feel bad for you. And if someone's told you there has been, they were lying to you. For example, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, there were 8 people that got blood clots out of 7.5 million shots. Now, if you catch COVID-19, there's a 31% chance you will get a blood clot. So I don't know if you need a math degree to notice that 8 out of 7.5 is 0.00001% chance of getting a blood clot. That's 4 zeros. Whereas if you catch COVID-19, you have a 31%, almost a third of the people that catch COVID-19 end up with blood clots. There are people in their 20s having strokes because of COVID-19. And the people that got the blood clots from the J&J vaccine were women of a particular age group that may have had a condition that fostered that chance of blood clots. So the target audience, the target population that would be at risk is really small. It's why they have just decided that they are going to reactivate the J&J being used in vaccinations, because they realize that the risk is really, really small as opposed to catching COVID-19 where the risk is really, really high of getting a blood clot. So I've blathered on long enough here now. This is the Shit Hits the Fan site. Yes, SHTF plan. I'm not going to give you the link. You can figure that out. It's full of shit. They at least have it in their name. They are at least honest in that regard. The whole site is full of conspiracy shit. It's dangerous. This is the kind of thing that's keeping people from doing what they should do, like wearing masks and not going to parties and bars and spring break and all that other stuff. If we had done what we should have back in the spring of 2020, there would be hundreds of thousands of Americans right now who would be alive. But they aren't. Thanks to people just like these nutters.